We need to talk. Important conversations about faith, family, and finances. Join our team for some honest conversations. And now, to kick things off, your host, Dan.
Welcome to week 3 of the We Need to Talk podcast. Today we're talking about finance, and we've got some great guests with us today. First, we've got the wonderful Olivia McDowell, and she is our worship pastor here at Discovery Church. She also represents the Gen Z age group, and so we're looking forward to hearing about finance from Liv. Welcome today.
Thank you. Hello.
We've also got Beck and Tim Lambert. Beck is the executive pastor here at Discovery Church, and Tim is her wonderful husband, and they have a lot of wisdom around the area of finance, and they're also going to be running a panel on the 9th of October, running a session on the 9th of October called...
Financial Health Check, I think we've called it.
That's it.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's the one with the pink background, if you've seen the graphics around, and we'd love you to sign up and get involved in that. So welcome, guys.
Thank
Hello.
you. Hello.
So the reason behind having these podcasts is to have a bit of fun, have a bit of a chat, and just really talk through some big topics. So that's why we're here today. Firstly, just wanted to do a quick shout out to Jeff and to Chelsea. Jeff is our production manager here, and he put together that wonderful intro that you just heard on the podcast.
Yay.
And Chelsea has been putting together our videos, and also to Sam, who's doing our audio today. So thanks to those guys for making this happen.
Thanks guys.
guys.
So if you guys were to see $2 on the ground, what would you do?
I'd straight up just pick it up and take it.
You just take it?
I'd take it. Yeah.
Oh, it depends. Am I in a room full of people? Then probably not. If I'm by myself, yeah, totally.
Oh, that's a good point.
I'd be looking around first to see if someone's actually dropped it, but if it's clear that it's not accounted for, it's fair game, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's so
I don't reckon I get a chance to get to it because if our middle son is around,
That's true.
he's a magnet for money. He will just dive on anything he sees.
Yeah.
Even if it's
Yeah.
left on the counter or something, it's gone. It's all his.
I recently found $1 at a park, and I said to my son, I was like, "Hey, Jude, come over here. Look, there's something on the ground." So I let him find it. He thought he found it, which was great.
That's nice.
What about $10?
Oh,
That's probably when I'd start to look around and wonder if someone had dropped it out of their pocket or something like that.
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely look around.
On Sunday, Matt preached the message on finance, and he started off his sermon talking about his first job. What were your first jobs, Tim?
Yeah, so I had several, I suppose in some ways, did some farming sort of stuff locally, but my first sort of main job that I had was as a pie boy at the MCG. So, hot pies, cold drinks, chocolate bars, ice creams, got to sell them at the MCG, went to several grand finals that way, which was pretty cool. And one highlight there too was actually I got to see Michael Jackson live even a couple of times, which was pretty cool.
Wow.
You can just not see him being a pie boy at all, can you? It just does not fit at all, does it?
That big voice was very helpful for
So fun.
being a pie boy. Commissioned pie boy too, actually. So we got paid based on how much we sold.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
Did you have to sell footy records too, or just pies?
Would have loved to have sold the footy records. They're very light and they were $2 each, I think, even back then. So you didn't have to sell too many to make some okay money. But no, they were very separate and very territorial, actually, the way they were structured. So
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
How about you
That's
guys?
so fun. I think technically my first job, my parents used to own a cafe. We used to have a Jamaica Blue at Forest Hill.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right in front of Target. So that was technically my first job. I'd work there on the weekends with my parents. But then once I was, I think it was 14 and 9 months you had to be. Again, I worked at another Jamaica Blue. But my parents had sold their cafe by that time, but I worked at another Jamaica Blue at that point. I've actually always had 3 jobs going at one time.
Wow.
Ever since I started working. So I'd had that job, worked at a childcare centre as well, and then I can't remember what my third job was. I think I was cleaning. Yeah.
Cool.
Always did 3.
Well, I was there at Forest Hill as well. That was
Oh,
my
really?
first job, not at
Hooray.
Jamaica Blue. I worked, you might need to be old enough to know, so Liv, you may not recognise these. But I used to work at Jazzy's. Do you remember Jazzy's?
yeah.
The pick and mix stores
Yep.
outside the cinemas.
Yeah.
And my friends were really jealous of the job because you got to eat as many lollies as you wanted throughout a shift. As long as you were doing your job and serving the customers, you could just go along and do your own little pick and mix for as much as long as you wanted. But it was a funny thing because there was just free access to it. You kind of didn't want it. It just,
Yeah.
you sort of
Yep.
were like, oh yeah, it's going to be
just
their
there.
next shift. So,
Yeah.
you know, whatever.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
so
wow.
fun.
So over the past week, we've done a bunch of Instagram polls around the different topics in the We Need to Talk series. And one of the ones we did last week was, where did you learn about finances? We had the responses were Google, school, friend or family, or financial advisor. And friend or family came out very much on top with 75% of people, which was very interesting that people are learning that through obviously growing up in their family and and through their friends. Whereabouts did you guys learn about finances?
Do you want me to go first?
for it.
Sure. Look, it varied. A lot of mine was self-taught early on. I picked up whatever books I could. I remember picking up a book called The Richest Man in Babylon when I must have been about 12 or 13, that my dad had sitting somewhere. And so I read through that right cover to cover and just lapped up every bit of information in that. There were several other authors that I read over time as I got older. And then I actually found someone who came along to our church and was quite involved in the finance space there, and particularly focusing on shares. And I spent a fair bit of time just sitting with him, a much older guy actually, and I'd go and meet up with him semi-regularly, sort of maybe once a month, and just asked him a heap of questions and sponged as much as I could off him. So a bit of both, bit of, self-taught and also jumping on and meeting someone and talking to them about it.
Yeah.
Didn't jump on him, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, but you sort out people to... You sort out the right people to...
That's right.
To learn from. That's great. And the other question on Instagram was, have you ever done a budget? And it looks like 87% of people have done a budget. Some people find it really hard and some people really love it. Any responses to that? Have you guys done budgets? Obviously, Beck, you've taught a lot about budgets within within our staff team. What are your opinions on budgets and thoughts?
I couldn't keep track of the number of budgets I've done in my life. That's even from really young. I remember doing budgets in my little notebook when I was probably had my first job and just had a little bit of income. So I had my little budget going even from that really young age. So I'm a big fan of budgets, and also the not set and forget budgets too, because some people, I'd be interested to know, out of that 87% of people who did a budget, did they just do one and then they never thought about it again? Or did they look at it every year or every 6 months or that kind of thing? So, I'm a big fan of the old budget because, for me, it's been a huge tool in my life and in our life, and, love them.
That's good.
How about you, Liv? Have you ever done a budget?
I have. I think when I first started working as well, my parents sat me down and we made up a budget together. But that very quickly dropped off at that age. And then when I moved out again, my cousin, actually, who's also a few years older than me, it was during lockdown. She Zoom called me and sat me down and did this big yearly budget for me, and then we went through a monthly one as well, which was
cool.
awesome. And that's been something that I still carry on now, less so than then because I'm back home with my parents, but I'm moving out again, so it'll be really
So is that just
helpful
on paper, or is this an
Yeah.
app or something?
Just on paper. She gave me an app as well. I can't remember what it was called, but I stopped using that because it was a subscription one, and I just didn't find it that helpful. I love having the spreadsheet in front of me so I can visually see it, because then I remember it as well. But yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So on Sunday, Matt preached in the morning and at night, and at night he was joined by Tim and Beck in a panel. But in the morning, if you missed that one, you can jump on the podcast and listen to that now. Just hit pause, go and listen to that, and come back to this podcast, if you like. The title of the message was, "Do you need more money?" It was a very provocative question, and it was a guide to financial discipleship. He talked about when we talk about money, we're talking about power and how money can be units of power. Learning to follow Jesus with our money is just as important as learning to follow Jesus with any area of our life. He also looked into some great proverbs. Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. Dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. And one who oppresses the poor to increase his wealth, and one who gives gifts to the rich, both come to poverty. He talked about wealth is morally neutral, and it's what you do with it that matters. He landed on some key points that were money is a servant and sharing is happiness. So thinking about that, we'll jump into some questions now. Over the past 12 months, the cost of living in Australia and across the world has gone up dramatically. In Australia, it's gone up by 6.1%. And some areas that we've been hardest hit are like the supermarket and, in fuel and amongst other things. In general, it feels like life's become a lot more expensive, and there's a whole bunch of life's become very subscription based, and there's a whole bunch of regular expenses that we're all faced with. Liv, as a Gen Z, how does it feel in these times when you've just come into the workforce in the past 5 or so years, starting to now sort of earn more money? You, like a lot of your age group would be having a full-time wage for the first time. How does it feel entering this space at a time when the cost of living is just gone straight up?
Yeah, it's definitely like the first thing that comes into my mind is that it is pretty overwhelming. Like just getting used to working full-time hours, having to manage a full-time wage, thinking about potentially renting or putting down a deposit or like those sorts of things. It's pretty overwhelming, and like there are, I think, a lot of negative voices too in the media, like on the news, even sometimes within like friendship groups as well, people that are like, oh, we're never going to be able to afford housing and that sort of thing, which, I mean, yeah, it's good to be realistic in one sense and know where like the market is heading and, understand what is realistic. But I think the more that I think and pray on it, I just feel a lot of peace with just being faithful with what I've got and like just starting with what's in my hands.
It's good.
Yeah.
So good.
So, Beck and Tim, what would you say are some ways that you've changed in your habits in the past 12 months because of this cost of living?
Yeah, we were sort of joking the other day that I think sometimes you can get a bit out of touch with how much things cost too, especially if you haven't had to buy them for a while. And so we're like, are we like the grandma who puts the $20 in the card every year and you just keep getting $20 for like 20 years and it's just, it continues on because it's still $20, right? But no, we were just like, are we getting out of touch? But definitely have felt the pressure in the supermarket and fuel prices and things like that. That's probably where we've noticed it. To go back to our point about the budgeting, what I would say to anyone when they're doing a budget is that you always want to factor in some margin and some emergency expenses, right? So I've always done that in budgeting. So I'm never right down to the last dollar, so that if things do go up, that my budget's kind of useless at that point. So we've always got margin factored in to our budget. So in that sense, we're probably okay. What I would say is that we probably, when we're feeling the pinch, is that we look at our luxury items. You've got the things, everybody these days, it seems, has like a subscription to Netflix, to Spotify, to Disney, to Apple. There's all those things. And just like literally looking at those kind of luxury items in your life, and you quickly see how much those things add up. You just got to be a bit more discerning, I think, and when times are a bit tougher and you got to tighten your belt a little bit. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, I'd say the other major impact is when you're looking at things like interest rates going up too. So one of our bigger expenses is our mortgage, and so if interest rates are going up, that actually has an impact on that too. And so reviewing those things and considering refinancing, all those sorts of things come into play too, albeit you want to make sure that everything's manageable in the process. But
we're literally about to look at refinancing our mortgage in a month's time, so that's going to be a real life example for us very soon.
Yeah. So Beck, what would you say are the main contributors to financial stress, anxiety, and among people of faith particularly?
Yeah, I think I don't think it's that different for people of faith to anyone else. I think people struggle with debt. They get in over their heads, potentially with credit cards with ridiculous interest rates attached to them. That's a huge contributor. People don't do a budget, and so therefore they just don't know what they're spending on. They just spend without thinking, and that can really contribute to a sense of stress and never having enough. I'm always shocked. I've always been shocked how many people are just hanging out for payday often. I worked, my first sort of grown-up job was in the construction industry, and those guys, if you didn't give them their payback like right on the moment, they were on the phone to you. And that always took me aback that how close to the line people often live. So I think, debt and living beyond your means is a big one. I think comparison is a massive one in our society, and I don't think Christians are exempt from that. I think, we've got call as Christians to live with contentment and to not go after material things in our life, but we do still fall into the trap of comparing ourselves to the friendship circle, to the family, to the neighbours. It's bigger cars, boats, caravans, better houses, all the things that you can get caught up with. Better shoes, Dan. Have shoes like Dan.
Well, as Matt said on Sunday, actually, the Joneses are broke, right? Yeah. And as Beck said there, ultimately people are comparing. They're not. There's always going to be people who have got more than you, right? So you're always if you're not careful, you can just get into that more monster trap. I think, and that's a big thing.
That's it. Nothing ever satisfies either. That new pair of shoes never satisfies. So, why do you think, Tim? Why do you think thinking ahead is important for financial health?
Yeah, look, thinking ahead makes a big difference in terms of if you are looking forward and make decisions now that will impact your future self, that's going to obviously have a big impact down the track, because choices made early on in particular do end up benefiting from that power of compound interest over the long term, and time is ultimately the biggest beneficiary in that space. So, for example, if someone, say a 20-year-old, for example, were to look at putting an amount away regularly until they were age 40 and then were to stop, if they were to then leave that until they were 60, compare that to, say, a 40-year-old who starts at 40 and does, say, even 4 times the amount, they're still not going to have the same amount as what that 20-year-old's going to have. So preparation ahead of time can make a big difference, and consistency can be a big key there too. So
that's good.
Yeah. Okay. So, I was actually going to touch on that anyway. For Gen Z, jumping into full-time jobs for the first time, what's the best way to actually think about now? What would a practical thing be for saving? Like what's something that someone who's just turned 23, they've just come out of uni and jumped to their first full-time job, like you're talking there about compound interest, what's a practical thing that they could actually do now? Yeah,
sure. And to be careful not to give financial advice in the process here, but look, consistency, as I said, is key. So I think paying yourself first, though, the concept of actually having money deducted straight out of your pay, budgeting is an important thing to do, but ultimately we often will spend what we can see. So if you actually have money automatically deducted, depending on how you're choosing to save that, you might choose to use super if you're wanting to use that for certain purposes, but you might also choose to just actually having a savings account where you're building a buffer, but actually having a place for that money to go that isn't necessarily visible or planned for your actual expenditure is a really good way to actually start saving early on.
Yeah, I love that about the visibility. It's such a key thing. So, that's a great point. So the prospect of buying a house at the moment for Gen Z and even millennials has become so far out of reach. How do you reckon that feels for you and your peers live at the moment? Like you touched on a little bit before, but the idea of one day owning a house.
Yeah, honestly, it does feel a little bit out of reach at this point. Like it's, and I don't know a lot about finance either, and like compound interest and all of that stuff. So I think that whole world of finance is still very new to me and might be very new to a lot of people my age too. I think just with a lot of the voices around the world around this stuff, like it definitely feels like it is a little bit out of reach, if like, especially if we're not preparing now, which it's a really hard thing to balance, wanting to save for a house when there's also things like travel and like experiences that you want to have in your 20s that like we're told this is the time to be, making those memories. And so it's a little bit difficult, like, and I find myself in that struggle as well of being like, I want to prepare myself for a family one day and having a home, but I also want to live my 20s and do I need to sacrifice one for the other? Like that's probably the struggle at the moment. And then you've got the layer of the whole, you've got a faith and there's discipleship and all that involved. So Beck, what would you say to the Gen Zs, the 21-year-olds, about discipleship and money and how they work together?
Yeah, we talked a bit about this on Sunday night on the panel, and it's going to sound like a really, really simple thing, and I know that it doesn't necessarily get to the heart of everything, say, that you've just expressed there, Liv, too. But I think the generosity factor, learning generosity when you're young is just a game changer for your life. I'm a huge believer and proponent of tithing. I always have. That was just an easy thing for me because I did learn it young, and so the first 10% of my income ever since I literally earned income went back to the church, and that just did something in me to grow me, to make me a more generous person, I think, to remind me that it's not mine anyway, that I'm just a steward. And so I guess the reason I say, why would I say that to the 21-year-olds, is that these things are so much easier to learn when you're young. If you are waiting to be generous or to tithe when you are older, it won't come. Like 90% of the time it won't come, because you can always say, I'm saving for a house deposit. So once I've saved for that, then I'll start to tithe, or I want to go on a big European holiday before I turn 30, and once I do that, then I'll start to tithe. There'll always be something, and so I would just say, learn the skill and discipleship of tithing and generosity early, and also again, and I'm going to sound like I'm repeating myself, sorry, just to, I guess, get across the comparison game early in your life and refuse to buy into that for you, and learn, as Paul says, I've learned to be content in whatever situation I'm in, and that's powerful not only for your finances, right, but for everything in your life. For I want to be married and I'm not married, but learning contentment in the midst. I want a baby and it's not happening, learning to be content. So many things that can be applied to, but in this instance, I'd say contentment in your finances is a game changer for your discipleship, I'd say.
Yeah, and that comes back to the title of the message. Do I need more money? And if you actually ask yourself that, and you can realize you can be content in it, it's so important. Mm-hmm. Yeah, your point about giving is that's a great one. And so many times I've seen like quotes online and people's comments and things saying, "I wish I was rich so I could be more generous." And it's just really backwards. And you think if it's going to take getting rich to be generous, it's you haven't quite figured it out yet.
Yeah.
Jumping to you as a parent, Tim, and of younger kids, so not so much kids who are who are now in the workforce or anything, but kids who are in their primary and high school. What are things you can be teaching them at this time? Like what are things for us as parents, or for those as parents who are listening? What are some things that we can be teaching them?
Yeah, look, I think first of all, it's worthwhile saying that some of these concepts are actually more caught than taught too. So what we actually demonstrate in how we do things, how we spend our money, what we choose to prioritize, and those sorts of things are a key thing to keep in mind. I have conversations with our kids about money a fair bit. I'm certainly not scared to discuss that, even at the dinner table and everything else. I get a few eye rolls every now and again when I try to talk about things. They all have a good idea as to what compound interest is, for example. It is one of my favourite topics. So getting their heads around that is something that they do have a bit of an understanding of. I think understanding that timepiece is a big one though, so that the earlier you start saving, the better. But also the contentment piece that Beck was talking about, and even to use an economic term, in terms of opportunity cost, which is just recognising that if you choose this, you can't choose this. So taking even a holiday as an example there, choosing to go into debt, for example, to go on a really good holiday will actually prevent certain other things down the track, or even just choosing to spend on it. There's things like that to consider there too. So I certainly have conversations with my kids. Our kids are different though too, right? So we try to talk to them where they're at. Our eldest one is just super keen on cars right now. He'd buy every car that he has in his garage on Need for Speed right now, and it'd be worth a small fortune, right? If he could do that. So trying to rein some of that in with him, and at the same time still being able to give him things as he needs them. We look at doing that. Our middle child, on the other hand, saves most of what he gets. He's the same one that Beck said would pick up the $2 coin straight away, and none of us would ever get to it. But he's also got a real thirst for knowledge around this space too. So I spend quite a bit of time with him playing various games. We play Monopoly. We play Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad occasionally, the cash flow game that he's put together, things like that. Ultimately, it depends on the child though, and how much they want to engage with it too.
I think just to interject too, one of our little sayings that we drive our kids crazy with, and they're not there yet, but Tim says, drive the cheapest car your ego can afford. And I think that's a really worthwhile one, not just for our kids, but anybody listening, right? It's
for us too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your car's a 10-year-old Mazda sitting there at the moment, and each time I get tempted to try to upgrade it, I remind myself the thing's only done 140,000 kilometres, and Beck's lucky if she does 10,000 Ks a year, so we can probably still keep it for another 5 years even.
So good.
Yeah, it's good. And it's so important to just to be modelling good habits around money, as you said, with our kids. So, yeah, that's a really important point that you mentioned there about it's what we do, not so much what we say. So that's great. So, Beck, would you say is there a Bible verse or a proverb that's a cornerstone for you guys, in your financial world and how it relates to discipleship?
Yeah, we've got a couple. There's Psalm 112, which is a beautiful psalm, which I won't read all of it out to you now because it's reasonably long. But probably the one that we have most frequently and recently quoted to each other is from Proverbs 11:24 in the Message version. It says, "The world of the generous gets larger and larger. The world of the stingy gets smaller and smaller." And so that just constantly keeps the concept of generosity in front of us. If we're ever tempted to withdraw, to become a bit more insular if things are feeling tight with the cost of living going up. We just always remind ourselves that we want a large, expansive world. We don't want to have a tiny little world where we get to keep it all to ourselves. And another plug for Sunday morning, if you haven't listened to Matt's sermon, it was really fantastic. And just picking up on something he said there is, if you are not sharing your resources, you know, it's actually kind of destructive to yourself. You become like this reservoir where there's not life. Things stagnate and things rot if you're keeping it all to yourself. So we try to constantly remind ourselves that our world, we want it to keep getting larger and not smaller and smaller. So
that's good. Something we discussed in preparation for today, Beck, was a concept around economic abuse. I'd love for you to share a bit more about that. Tell us about what it is and
Yeah, sure. It's not a very well-known form of abuse. It's a form of domestic abuse, and it doesn't really get talked about a lot. So I just thought it was worth mentioning. By no means am I an expert, and I would encourage people to do their research and look online at the various resources that are out there. But basically, it's a really subtle form of domestic abuse where one partner exerts control over the other by limiting access to bank accounts and to things that money can buy. So maybe limiting access to transport or housing options. And so it's all aimed at being in control and having one partner really dependent on the other partner and unable to live independently or make choices independently. And so I just think it's worth putting out there that if you think you might be experiencing that, or you know somebody who is in that situation, have a conversation about it. And if you're in a situation where you feel like you're the partner who doesn't know about money, I'm not very good with money, so I just let my partner handle all of that, but you don't have any idea where your money goes, and you don't have any idea how much things cost because you've just literally handed it over, I would encourage you to get educated in that space. You don't have to be the one to do the things, but you should be one who understands where your money's going and have access to it if you want and need it. And nobody should have the right to withhold money from you in that sense. So I just wanted to, I guess, take a moment to talk about that, because as I said, it's just we know about lots of forms of abuse, but economic abuse kind of flies under the radar a bit.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks for sharing. So, like, as we wrap up this conversation, I just wanted to touch on one more thing, and that's online scams. So, online scams are on the rise, as you probably know, and a lot of people have been victim to being scammed online and given over money, given over their trust, had their money stolen, that sort of thing. What advice would you give for people who've had this happen in learning to trust God again, to learning to be generous and to tithe again, and to trust others again? What advice would you guys give in that space?
Looking at you, you're looking at me.
I'm happy to comment on it.
Sure.
Look, I suppose a key thing there is I think sometimes people make the mistake of pinning things on God when they've got nothing directly to do with God. And ultimately, God is a generous God. He wants us to have good things. He takes care of us, and he is ultimately our provider. And seeing him in that light, I think, is a really powerful and important thing to do.
I guess if you're in a situation where maybe you have been scammed before, we all have to learn from our experiences, bitter or otherwise, in our lives. And I would just say, I guess, just be really careful. I guess maybe it does have a little bit to do with that financial abuse piece too. It's just know where your money's going. If somebody's asking you for money, don't feel afraid to ask questions back. What are you doing with this? Where's it going? You know, you have a right to understand these things and not just take somebody at their word necessarily. So I would say do your research, and if you're ever uncertain, listen to that gut feel that something maybe isn't quite right. And even if everything's okay, it's good to check anyway, right? I had a situation a couple of months ago where I got a text message from NAB, and they said, you know, you've got we've detected some unusual activity, click on this or whatever. And I was like, oh, that doesn't feel right to do that. And so I ended up just jumping on the phone and calling NAB and saying, hey, I got this text message, not sure if it's a scam, not sure what the deal is. It turned out it actually was legit. They actually were trying to stop a foreign transaction on my bank account. Whoa. And they'd caught it, thankfully. But it was a legitimate transaction. But the guy on the line said to me, look, you did the right thing. You weren't sure. You jumped on the phone. You asked questions, and that's exactly what you should do. So I would say always ask questions, and don't apologise for asking questions in that regard.
That's good.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, comments, things that you wanted to share today that you might want to bring to the table now? Is there anything else that we haven't covered off today?
I just comment. We're talking about proverbs and verses and all of those sorts of things. One of my favourite quotes is a Wesley quote where he said, "Earn all you can, save all you can, and give all you can." And I think a lot of people really do a good job potentially on those first two, but sometimes maybe not on that third one in terms of giving all we can. I think if people were to have that as a core objective or a core thing that they focus on doing, I think the world would be a whole lot better place too. So I think that's a worthwhile thing to point out.
That's good.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'd reiterate again, just don't play the comparison game, because it's not a game you'll ever win.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, the thing that really stuck out to me from Matt's sermon on Sunday is that money is a servant. Like that line has been kind of ingrained in my mind since he said it. And I think it's so profound because we often feel like we're slaves to our money. Yeah. That we're just working to pay off bills. And I just think that's so important for us to remember that our money is not our own. Like even though we are, we're hardworking, and especially for most of us in this working class too, like we are hard workers, but our money is not our own, and we can't hold on to those things too tightly.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, well, I mean, that wraps up the action points from Matt's message on Sunday, which were to focus on the heart and don't fall for the comparison trap, and lastly, to develop an approach to money management. My encouragement today would be what's something you can do next? Like, who can you talk to, and who can you learn from to develop this approach to money management? So that's it for the podcast. This series has just been for just this We Need to Talk series. So we've enjoyed bringing you these 3 podcasts and going a bit deeper into these spaces of faith, family, and finance. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it and want to reach out, and you've got any other questions or topics you'd love to hear stuff about, feel free to reach out to us at arts@discoverychurch.com.au. And maybe we can get the gang back together and chat about it around the table. So thanks, guys, for joining us today.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks for having us.
Hasn't Dan done a great job moderating? He's
so
just been amazing. So
amazing.
Well done, Dan.
Thank you. And don't forget that we've got the Personal Finances Health Check coming up on the 9th of October. So jump onto our website and register for that. You can do that at discoverychurch.com.au. Tim and Beck will be sharing in that space, and so that's on a Sunday, October 9, straight after our 10 a.m. service. And that's going to be a great space to learn more. As always, like, subscribe, give us ratings, and share these podcasts and videos where you can. And hashtag We Need to Talk if you are spending time with God and you're having a moment of talking with God, and you want to share that with the world, please do it. It's an encouragement to us, and it's an encouragement to to others. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to We Need to Talk. If you would like to support the podcast, please consider leaving an honest review and star rating wherever you're listening. It only takes a few minutes and helps us get the message out to more people who need it.